Hello, this is Cotton Stoops and welcome back to another Loomian Legacy video, and in today's video we got some new changes to all the Vari evolutions. I'm just going to quickly run down the list and put the screenshot on screen. However, all the varilutions except for one has gotten new moves. Servaling got Raging Tackle and Stampede. Stampede won't be that great of a move, however Raging Tackle will be because Raging Tackle on a typeless type Loomian is severely good, especially when you pair that up with Boast. While it's definitely not an upgrade or a significant upgrade to Servalin, it's just a move that's a buff. That's basically all it is. However, Kirillin also got a few moves, specifically Sharpen and Outburst, that you really want to take note of. It did get Draco Beam, but it really doesn't matter. Sharpen is just really good for Kirillin, as your hasty ability doesn't really help you at all with your accuracy, and then of course boosting your accuracy with Sharpen is very good. Outburst also makes it hit very hard, however Primal Slash will still be able to just be ran over Outburst simply because it does a lot more damage, and of course Outburst is scaled on energy, so you're not always going to be hitting as hard as you're used to. Zeppelin also did get Perch, which is admittedly a good buff, however it's still going to be running Peace of Mind and Provoke because the utility that Provoke provides is just very solid, and you still want to keep your Mudslide and your Resonate. And then as for Venilin, it got Muck Blast and Tricky Tactics, but the main thing you want to look here is Mudslide. Now Venilin can pretty much be a similar role to what other bulky range sponges are. They can remove hazards, they can just status you with a poison, or a poison, and then they can lower your speed through Mud Spatter. They can provide utility with Barter, all that stuff. So Venilin getting a slight buff, that is also good for it. Wrestling also getting a very good buff in Rogue Assault, Frost Punch, and Electro Punch. Funny enough, Rogue Assault still does more damage to a Bar Blast, which Electro Punch will of course help you with. However, you still want to use Electro Punch because the defense drops aren't great, so kind of goes to show how hard Wrestling with Ace kind of just do, and that's obviously still very good. And finally, the last Loomian, Buzzlin, is getting Parasitized, which should have gotten it already. I don't know why it took it this long to get it. Gust, which is pretty useless on an offensive Loomian because you're really not going to get a lot of utility from Buzzlin, just keep on swapping in on potential hits. Poison Barbs is fine for it. It's definitely not the greatest lead for any type of hazards because one, Buzzlin isn't the fastest thing in the world, and then Venom Slash, it's just an upgrade from Baneful Bash. That's pretty much all you need to know about these Vari buffs. Of course, probably the best one that got benefited out of this is Wrestling and Kirillin. You'll probably be seeing a lot of those on the Coliseum later on, so I'll be getting to videos on that. Now next up, I will be going into more in depth into one Loomian here, and that is of course Pyrelin. Pyrelin is getting its HP nerf from 119 to 99, so now its melee attack went from 24 to 44, so you know where those stats are being distributed. Now me personally, I don't really use Pyrelin or most of these bulky teams that Pyrelin just gets fit on. Pyrelin is of course still a good Loomian. If you look at my past streams or just my regular PvP videos that I do once in a while, I never use Pyrelin, and that kind of just goes to show the bias or the perspective that I'm coming through. I don't have bias, and from my perspective, I just think that this is a really undeserved nerf. When Jamie is nerfing a Loomian, and this goes for pretty much any developer in the game, it's one, either too oppressive or too polarizing in the metagame, or two, it's pretty dominant in its role, and both of these reasons do coincide with each other. However, the main issue that I have with these nerfs to Pyrelin is that Pyrelin is none of these, and I'll be going quickly into depth of this. First off, Pyrelin being the dominant role. Pyrelin is at its core a base fire ranged wall that has the advantages of stopping the Shadia and Silver Stratosaur. That's pretty much what Pyrelin is mostly used for in today's metagame. And of course, it does have other attributes such as Adaptive Assault, burning with its secondary effect, Mud Spatter, just having speed control, and if you really want to, it has Burn Up, but Burn Up's not really ran as much because there's a lot better hazard removers such as Cleone and Gargolem Defense. However, the option is there. That's the main thing for Pyrelin. And Pyrelin is seen as just a Loomian that is probably the best in its role. However, Pyrelin, while still arguably probably one of the better Lumens in its role, has a lot of competition now. And this is mainly with the fact that this meta, with Glaciadia and metal types now being a lot more warranted than ever, is really important. As Loomian such as Seer Knight, which is a very common Loomian in this metagame, has risen to prominence in both tournament and regular Coliseum usage, as Seer Knight common ranged walls in this metagame, Soul Burst, Gas Stroke, and Cleone, which have been proved to be really common in a lot of these tournament and Coliseum usage stats, even one of them overtopping Pyrelin in the Coliseum usage stats. And this kind of goes to show how not polarizing Pyrelin really is. Usually Pyrelin is the dominant ranged wall on these teams. However, while it might still be and is still probably still being used a lot more well, Soul Burst, Gas Stroke, and Cleone pretty much wall what most Pyrelins would be able to do, except for both of their cases to Glaciadia. And we just discovered and we just talked about how Pyrelin is also sharing those other aspects of stopping Glaciadia with other Lumians. It's not just Seer Knight. You have a lot of other metal type Lumians that are being used, such as Stratosaur and Valkyrie. Valkyrie, by the way, still being a very common Lumian in this metagame. You also do have other checks to Glaciadia that are still being used, such as Miraith, which is just below the usage for OU. And Eleguana. There's just a lot of things that can stop Glaciadia. And while Pyrelin having that niche to stop Glaciadia over Cleone or Soul Burst, Gas Stroke to other very good ranged walls in this metagame, Pyrelin can't really have a good reason to justify using over them when there's other Lumians that can just use that. You can use that to apply your weaknesses to Glaciadia and Soul Burst Strat. There's just a lot of things that Pyrelin still can do. It's still pretty splashable, however it's still not nearly as warranted onto teams than others. And of course, the polarizing or the unhealthiness attribute for Pyrelin. I don't think this does very coincide with the second reason, however pretty much what I've just said doesn't really affect Pyrelin in a sort of way where it's very oppressive. There's really not a lot of ways, or there's really a bunch of ways you can stop Pyrelin. Of course, Adaptive Assault being a very good move to just possibly burn melee attackers. However, right now, the HP before still makes Pyrelin weak to melee attackers. It still has a 63 base melee defense and much more. There's a lot of common water types in this metagame. You have Jalusa, which is one of the most common Lumians in both tournament and Coliseum usage, being able to stomp through whatever Pyrelin tries to do. You have Peace of Mind Cleones, which is very common, stopping what Pyrelin can do. You have Soul Burst Eruptodon, Valkyrie, Charonix, all common ranged attackers that can break through Pyrelin. Meditoad as well can just break through Pyrelin. There's just a lot of stuff that Pyrelin right now really has to watch out for. And of course, some of these Lumians like Valkyrie and they all existed before Pyrelin or before all these new Lumians. However, now that these new Lumians are out, this Pyrelin can't really have the same splash ability as you do have to have before. In fact, there's a lot more required Lumians on a lot more teams. Jalusa and pretty much all the bulky waters are required on teams for Soul Burst Eruptodon. You have metal types like Valkyrie or Seer Knight or Stratosaur that are required on teams to stop Soul Burst, or not Soul Burst, but Glaciadia. You have melee walls such as Obsidian and Yursnack that are pretty much reliant on and put to a lot of teams because of Tatab. When you really look at it, when I go over the pretty much top tier offensive threats, Pyrelin can't really cover all of that, and a lot of these offensive Lumians in these metagames can break through Pyrelin. And of course, I will be going over the matchups that Pyrelin does help your team with, but like I said, both Soul Burst, Gas Stroke, and Cleone can cover that. The only main thing that you can really argue that Pyrelin can have over these two ranged walls when it comes to just walling range stuff is mixed Zulongs that are running Chili Chomp. That's pretty much the only OU example that pretty much has that. And when you really dumb it down to that, that is just showing how Pyrelin really isn't deserving of this nerf. And of course, this is the conclusion and my thoughts on these nerfs and buffs. There's really not a lot of things I can really add. Other than Pyrelin, which I did talk about a lot, these Vari evolution buffs are certainly buffs in the right direction. However, these buffs aren't nearly enough to justify using most of them. We really only got a few Loomians that I would really suggest using now, and that is Kirillin with Sharpen, and Wrestlin still can be a little bit better. However, Wrestlin's still outclassed by the likes of Metagon, so not really much there. Zeppelin is still the same as it was. Buzzlin did get a little bit better, but most of these are just stab upgrades. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the Vari evolutions with their nerfs and buffs. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. So yeah, this is Cotton Stoops signing off to remind you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.